Hello guys, so today what I want to talk about is the burden of proof, and this is something which crops up quite a lot in conversations between atheists and Christians in particular, as to who has the burden of proof. I know that a lot of Christians will say that atheists are denying the existence of God, so they have got an equal burden of proof to a theist. The theist is making A theist doesn't claim is not claiming knowledge as such, but is saying that they believe something to be true. So they're making a truth claim that there is a God. And by the same token, a lot of theists will say that atheists are also making a truth claim that there is no God or there are no gods. There are atheists who assert that there are no gods or there is no God. And obviously, if you find an atheist of that description who says there are no gods, then in my view, that atheist has put themselves into an unnecessarily difficult position, because naturally they will have to defend it and they will have to justify it, which is always going to be extremely difficult to establish the non-existence of any entity, whether it be physical or supernatural. If we take the Loch Ness Monster, for example, and you assert there is no Loch Ness Monster, you're putting yourself in a position where the burden of proof rests on you to justify that statement. How can you possibly justify it? Even if you could drain the loch, or even if the loch dried up and there was no monster, there was no plesiosaur, there was no monster at the bottom of it, somebody could always say, well, maybe somebody took it out and put it somewhere else. Still might exist. So in order to establish the non-existence of something, you would more or less have to be in all places at all times, not only in the physical world, but if there was a supernatural world, you'd have to be there too, in all places at all times. So it's not really advisable to assert that something doesn't exist. But there are atheists who will assert that, and they may believe they have some justification, but in my view, they're putting themselves in an unnecessarily they're putting themselves in a position where it's going to be more or less almost impossible to have a proper discourse, because a really clever Christian debater finding an atheist who asserts that there are no gods will focus on that. Will say, okay, I'll justify God, but first you have got to justify claiming that there are no gods. So let's do that. And if you've got 1 hour to talk to somebody, a Christian, and you spend a whole hour trying to justify the unjustifiable, there'll be no time left to discuss the theism. So it's much better. And I would say to atheists, even if you believe that there are no gods, if you're in a discussion with a Christian, don't say that. In the same way that I always say that I'm a methodological naturalist, and that Christians have accused me of being a philosophical naturalist, because they know that philosophical naturalists assert that only the natural world exists. And there you are, there's your burden of proof. Prove to me that there's nothing beyond the material world. And all of a sudden, you're as fallacious and irrational as they are. So much better to be a methodological naturalist and admit that science is a limited tool, we're stuck with it, and that there may be a world which is immaterial and supernatural, something beyond the world that manifests in front of us. But the tools that we've got limit us to the material world. Much better to be that than to put yourself in an unnecessary position of having a burden of proof, because it's so important to get the burden of proof right so that you can have a productive conversation. And it's not productive to try and prove the non-existence of something. It's productive for a Christian who doesn't want to justify their beliefs. But for you as an atheist, it's not productive, and it's destructive, because you will, if you put yourself in that unnecessary position, you will end up going away and not having made any progress whatsoever, and realizing that you've done poorly in the argument. So I've seen it many times. I've seen, particularly on the atheist experience, I've seen many Christians come on and say, well, you say that you lack belief in God, but it seems to me that really you believe there are no gods. You're saying that there are no gods. And of course it's straw manning, really. But I've seen it in Christian videos as well. Actually, Christian videos which teach apologetics always go for atheism, the definition, they go for hard atheism. In other words, atheists say there are no gods, so prove it. And we'll never get around then to discussing what we believe. We won't have to defend our position to atheists, because you'll tie them up trying to prove the unprovable. So that's what I think about burden of proof. I don't believe that atheists have got the burden of proof, and you'd be a dumb atheist to put yourself in a position where you have the burden of proof. So don't say there are no gods. You may believe there are no gods, but there's no need to say it. Just say you lack a belief in God, as I do. I'm not saying there are no gods. I'm just saying I lack a belief in God. And you see, the thing is, with other sort of supernatural entities, or like fairies and other things like that, most people will say, I know there are no such things as fairies. And Christians will probably say that too. Say, no, yeah, agreed. There are no such things as fairies. But an atheist is not allowed to say there's no such thing as a God. It's a different ball game. I mean, they should be the same. But when it comes to religion, if you start asserting that a religion is false, you've got to prove it. You've got to prove it. It's better to say, I simply don't believe in it. So, okay, well, that's all on the burden of proof. I don't know what you think. Do you have anything to add? If so, I'd be delighted to hear it. Maybe you think that atheists have got some degree of burden of proof for saying they lack a belief in God. You have to, because an atheist can just say, well, you haven't presented me with enough evidence, therefore I lack a belief in God. But a Christian might turn around and say, well, maybe you lack a belief in God for other reasons as well, and you have to prove, you have to say more in terms of justifying your lack of belief in God, not just that there's not enough evidence. So maybe you believe that even under those conditions, soft atheists have also got some kind of burden of proof. So I don't think they have, but if you disagree with me, or if you've got anything useful to add, down below. And if you've enjoyed this video, if you could if you could give me a thumbs up, and if you want to get more content, that I'm going to be doing lots more videos on reviewing debates and all sorts of stuff with atheism on this channel. So I hope that you'll maybe subscribe to me and you'll get updates on regular content. So, well, okay. Hope to see you again soon.